Sam Carter squints against the desert sun to find a glaring orange notice pinned to his garden gate. Fire hazard, immediate action required. The paper flapped lazily in the dry June breeze, the bold black letters stark against the faded wood of his gate. He leaned closer, pulling his glasses from his shirt pocket. The date was today. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably Karen Holloway's. He stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch across his modest front yard. Rows of sagebrush, agave, and blooming desert marigolds lined the gravel paths, their silvery leaves shimmering under the Arizona sun. It had taken him years to get the garden just right, balanced, drought-proof, and fire-resistant. But none of that mattered, apparently. Not to the HOA. Back inside, he placed the notice carefully on his kitchen table, next to a framed photo of Ellen in her gardening hat, holding up a handful of baby cactus sprouts. June always brought back the scent of sage and Ellen's voice reminding him, "It's not just a garden, it's a legacy." He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the table, rereading the citation. According to the HOA, his yard posed a serious ignition threat due to dry organic overgrowth. The wording was clinical, almost sterile, and completely off base. Most of his plants were native species specifically chosen for fire safety. He would know. He used to design them. The knock came right as he was about to pull out the county's fire code binder from the bookshelf. He knew that knock. Firm, rhythmic, authoritative. When he opened the door, Karen was already halfway up the path, clipboard in hand, heels sinking into the gravel. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "I trust you received the notice." "I did," he replied, keeping his tone even, "and I have some questions." She gave a tight smile. "Of course, I'm here to explain. The HOA conducted a routine fire safety assessment last week. Your property was flagged for non-compliance." "With what exactly?" Sam gestured toward the yard behind him. "These plants are fire-resistant, all native, low profile, no deadwood." "The concern," she said, stepping closer, "is the overall density and perimeter spacing. The board voted to issue a warning and assign a 7-day compliance period. After that, removal begins." He raised an eyebrow. "Removal?" "Yes. If you don't clear the overgrowth, we'll send a licensed crew. It's for the safety of the neighborhood." Sam folded his arms. "Karen, nothing on this property violates county fire code. I helped write the landscaping guidelines for the Conservation District back in 2002. Karen tilted her head. "Well, this isn't about the county, it's about the HOA's standards." There it was, the line she always used when logic got in the way. "I'll review the bylaws," Sam said, his voice dry, "and I'd like to see the board's vote record on this." "I'm sure you will," she said with a little smirk. "But in the meantime, I've already taken the liberty of contacting a landscaping service, just in case." The words hung in the air between them. She turned without waiting for a reply, her heels clicking with each confident step. Sam watched her disappear past the mailbox before shutting the door. Later that afternoon, mailman Greg showed up right on schedule. Sam met him at the gate. "Afternoon, Sam," Greg said, handing over a bundle of envelopes. "Heard the board's cracking down. You're not the first." Sam nodded slowly. "Karen's on a mission." "Yeah," Greg said, glancing around the yard. "Though between you and me, this place looks better than half the HOA. Karen's lawn, brown and patchy last I saw." Sam gave a quiet laugh. "She called it a strategic droughtscape." Greg snorted. "Strategic laziness, more like?" As Greg walked off down the block, Sam stood alone in his yard. The shadows were starting to stretch, the sun slipping behind the rooftops of Oak Ridge Estates. Most of the homes were painted the same beige, with identical shrubs trimmed into lifeless boxes. Sam's garden, wild but orderly, stood in stubborn contrast. He headed back inside, filled the kettle, and dropped a chamomile tea bag into his favorite cup. As the water boiled, he reached for the thick binder marked Oak Ridge HOA Bylaws, 2023 edition. The evening settled in around him. Outside, the wind rustled the sage. Inside, the tea steeped as he sat on his porch, the binder open across his knees. He took a slow sip, watching the horizon go purple. "You want a fire? Let's talk about fire codes." Sam drives to the county records office, not to complain, but to understand the system that's threatening his garden. The old Ford creaks a little as it pulls into the narrow lot outside the beige government building. The windshield is dusty, streaked from last week's brief sprinkle, and the sun has already turned the dashboard too hot to touch. Sam slips a straw hat on before stepping into the dry furnace of late afternoon Tucson. Inside, the building hums with fluorescent lights and the slow rhythm of bureaucracy. A ceiling fan clacks somewhere overhead, more for sound than cooling. Sam waits behind a young couple asking about business permits. When his turn comes, the clerk, a woman in her early 60s with a bright turquoise necklace, gives him a welcoming smile. "Afternoon," she says. "What can I help you find today?" Sam slides a slip of paper across the counter. "I need access to landscape fire compliance exemptions, specifically under Firewise guidelines for residential properties, native plant exemptions." "Someone get cited?" she asks, raising an eyebrow. "HOA's idea of hazard doesn't match mine," Sam replies with a dry smile. She chuckles. "Wouldn't be the first time. You're looking for Section 18.3. They moved the archives upstairs. Elevator's out, though." "I'll take the stairs," Sam says, tipping his hat. Upstairs, the records room smells faintly of lemon oil and microfilm. Sam finds the binder he needs and flips through the laminated pages with the ease of someone who's done this before. Sure enough, under Section 18.3b, the law is crystal clear. Drought-tolerant and native species approved by the Arizona Department of Forestry are exempt from residential clearance enforcement, provided maintenance is up to date. His garden fits every line. He takes photos of the page, careful to get the reference codes. He adds a few notes in a pocket spiral notepad, just like the one Ellen used to keep near the potting bench. By the time he's heading back down the stairs, a familiar voice calls out from the hallway. "Still fighting the good fight, Carter?" Sam turns and grins. "Curtis Delgado, I was hoping I'd find you in this rabbit warren." Curtis is broader than Sam remembers, with a shock of white hair and a limp in his right leg. But his eyes are sharp, and he still wears his county badge on an old lanyard, more habit than authority. "Let me guess," Curtis says. "HOA on your back again?" "They're trying to bulldoze my garden for being a fire hazard." Sam holds up the citation. Curtis groans. "You still using native plants?" "Same as always." "Then it's nonsense. You know that." "I do. That's why I'm here." Curtis glances around, then motions toward the building's break room. Inside, he pours 2 cups of coffee from an ancient steel percolator. "They pulled this on a guy up near Oro Valley last year," Curtis says, handing Sam a mug. "Wanted to replace his mesquite trees with turf. Claimed it was safer. County laughed them out the door." "Sounds familiar," Sam mutters. He leans in. "I need more than just a rebuttal. I need leverage." Curtis raises an eyebrow. "You thinking counterclaim?" "Maybe," Sam says, sipping. "Depends what we find." Curtis leans back in his chair, tapping his temple. "Karen Holloway, right? She's HOA president?" "Still is, and confident as ever." Curtis nods slowly. "I remember something. Her pool. Built back when the code was different. 2006, I think. Might have skipped an update or two. If the fencing is off, even a few inches..." Sam perks up. "That enough to file a complaint?" "Oh yeah," Curtis says. "If her pool fencing is off by more than 6 inches, the whole thing's in violation. And that's enough to trigger condemnation." Sam sets his coffee down, thoughts already forming. He pulls out a folded neighborhood map from his notebook. "She's 2 streets over, backs up to the park trail." "Easy line of sight," Curtis says, "assuming we're just 2 old men out for a walk." Sam chuckles. "Might as well stretch the legs." Curtis stands, cracking his back. "Let's swing by my place first. I've got a laser rangefinder in the garage." "Still keeping the good tools?" "Always." They shake hands, their old rhythm quickly returning. 2 men not looking for a fight, but unwilling to back down from one. Sam nods, pocketing his notes. "Let's measure some fences." Curtis and Sam crouch behind mesquite trees on the public trail, skirting Karen's backyard, binoculars in hand. The sun had dipped low enough to paint the sky in the dusty pinks, casting long shadows over the desert ground. The scent of sun-warmed creosote hung in the air, mixing with faint laughter and the clink of glassware coming from the party just beyond the wrought iron fence. Sam shifted his knees, careful not to rustle the dry brush. "She said everything was compliant," he murmured. "I remember it like it was yesterday." Curtis peered through the binoculars. "That's the thing about people who talk in absolutes. They're usually trying to cover something up. In the fading light, the outline of Karen's backyard came into focus. A string of lanterns glowed above the pool area, illuminating a small gathering of neighbors sipping drinks and lounging in plastic chairs. Karen, in a wide-brimmed hat and bold floral blouse, was chatting near the grill, gesturing toward the pool as if it were her kingdom. Curtis adjusted the laser rangefinder, its green dot flickering across the fence posts. He took 3 careful readings, pausing between each. North side, 6 feet, 4 inches. South side, barely 4 feet, 7. Code says minimum 5 feet. That's a 2-foot discrepancy. Sam nodded and flipped open his small notebook. He recorded the measurements, then reached for the camera hanging from his neck. One click, then another. Photos of the fence, the distance from ground to rail, the uneven posts. He zoomed in on a corner where the metal bar had rusted through and sagged slightly inward. "Get that drain too," Curtis whispered, pointing toward a patch of darkened gravel along the base of the retaining wall. Sam moved to the right, careful to stay within the trail easement. The pool's drainage outlet was barely visible behind a lattice panel. A muddy trickle extended past the property line, trailing into the edge of the neighboring lot. "I'll get it from 2 angles," Sam said, snapping more photos. "Drain, flow path, boundary marker." Curtis gave a low whistle. "That erosion's not just a code problem. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the branches overhead. Voices from the backyard drifted closer. A burst of laughter, then Karen's unmistakable tone rising in mock indignation. Sam and Curtis ducked lower, though they were well shielded by the thicket. "We should head out," Curtis muttered. Sam took one last photo, making sure the timestamp was visible on the display. "Let's go." They moved slowly down the trail, not speaking until they reached the truck. The sky had shifted to a deep purple, stars beginning to prick through above the desert ridge. Inside the cab, neither man turned on the radio. Curtis finally broke the silence. "You ready for this?" Sam's voice was steady. More than ever. They drove home in silence, headlights cutting a clean path through the dusk. That night, Sam stayed up late printing the photos, labeling them with neat handwriting, and assembling the packet with a quiet sense of purpose. The morning air was cool when he stepped out with the manila envelope in hand. He walked it down to the local post office himself, bypassing the mailbox and heading straight to the counter. "Certified, please," he told the clerk. "Delivery confirmation?" she asked. Sam nodded. "Absolutely." The clerk weighed the envelope and slid it into the outgoing tray. "Should land on their desk tomorrow morning." Sam thanked her and stepped back outside, blinking against the rising sun. He didn't smile, but there was a stillness to him now, like the ground before a long-awaited rain. Later that afternoon, as he was trimming a stubborn mesquite branch near the side gate, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Curtis. "Inspection approved. They'll be at Karen's Tuesday at 9 a.m. The sharp rap of knuckles on her front door jolts Karen awake. 2 county inspectors stand waiting, clipboards in hand. She squints at them through the peephole, hair pinned awkwardly from sleep, makeup absent. The early Arizona sun casting sharp shadows across her hallway floor. When she opens the door, the older of the 2 inspectors offers a neutral smile. "Mrs. Holloway, we're with Pima County Public Safety. You received notice of today's inspection." Karen pulls her robe tighter. "Yes, but I assumed you'd call ahead." The younger inspector checks his clipboard. "Per protocol, external inspection requires no appointment. Interior access won't be necessary today." Karen forces a tight smile. "Of course. You'll find everything is in order." She gestures stiffly, stepping aside to let them onto the side path that leads to the backyard. The air already smells faintly of chlorine and sun-baked concrete. The pool glistens under the morning light, surrounded by potted plants and a white aluminum fence with decorative ironwork. As the inspectors begin their circuit, Karen hovers behind them, pointing things out before they ask. "The fencing was installed just a few years ago," she says. "It was reviewed during the last HOA audit." The older inspector doesn't look up from his measuring wheel. "We're using current county code. That supersedes HOA evaluations." Karen bites her lip but says nothing. The younger inspector crouches near the drainage outlet along the retaining wall, frowning. He jots a note, then unrolls a small chalk reel and marks a runoff channel. "That's just rainwater," Karen says quickly. The inspector doesn't respond. From across the street, Sam watches from his porch, a ceramic mug cradled in his hands. He doesn't move, doesn't wave, just sips slowly and waits. A few houses down, two neighbors emerge and pretend to check their mail, glancing toward Karen's yard with thinly veiled interest. Back inside her fence, the inspectors measure the fence height at several points, making careful notations. One uses a level tool to test vertical integrity. Another steps back and takes a photograph from the street side boundary. Karen clears her throat. I've had no prior complaints. This pool is a central part of my yard. It's where I host HOA events. That may be, says the older inspector, but our assessment concerns public safety, not social function. Whatever minor issue you've found, I can fix it. Surely this doesn't require a citation. The younger man finishes filling out a form and detaches the top copy. Actually, it does. He hands it to her. Per County Code 11.2.5. A. Fencing around private pools must maintain a consistent minimum height of 60 inches from grade. Yours falls short on the east and south sides. Additionally, drainage runoff has exceeded your property line. That constitutes an environmental concern. Karen scans the paper. Her mouth opens, but no words follow. This is a formal notice of condemnation, the inspector continues. You'll need to drain the pool and restrict access within 14 days. If violations aren't resolved by then, the matter escalates to enforcement. They pack their tools without further comment, returning to their vehicle with practiced efficiency. Karen stands frozen, pink robe rustling in the breeze, form limp and unbalanced like the faulty fence behind her. Across the street, Sam lowers his mug and quietly steps inside. By midday, word has already spread. A post on the neighborhood bulletin board includes a blurry photo of the inspector's truck. Someone adds, HOA pool might be out of commission this summer, followed by a cascade of comments, some gleeful, others defensive. That evening, the HOA clubhouse fills faster than usual. The regulars arrive early, murmuring quietly and passing homemade cookies and napkins. Karen enters 5 minutes late, dressed sharply, folder in hand. She doesn't make eye contact with anyone. The room quiets as she reaches the front. I'd like to begin with item 1, she says, unfolding her notes. Property compliance concerns, specifically fire safety violations at Mr. Carter's residence. There's a pause. A man near the back clears his throat. Mr. Levine, late 70s, served on the board a decade ago. He leans on his cane as he rises. I think we should discuss something else first, he says. Like why we've spent the last 2 months targeting Sam's garden when the president's house is the real risk. There's a beat of stunned silence. Karen lowers her folder just an inch. That inspection was exaggerated. I saw the report, Mr. Levine interrupts. Fence gaps, drainage runoff, a condemned pool. That's not minor. Several heads nod. Someone mutters, ridiculous. Another adds, double standards. Karen glances across the room, scanning for allies, but the usual supporters won't meet her eye. A woman near the snacks whispers to her friend, loud enough to be heard, "She better not try to find me again for lavender bushes." Karen clutches her folder tighter. Her jaw twitches once. Then, without a word, she turns on her heel and storms out, heels clicking against the linoleum. The room remains silent for several long seconds. Then, a low murmur starts. 2 people whisper about a leadership vote. Another asks if bylaw amendments are allowed mid-year. Outside, the sky has turned a deep electric blue. Porch lights begin to flicker on across Oak Ridge Estates. Karen clutches her folder and storms out as murmurs of a leadership vote begin. Karen slams open the clubhouse doors the next day, demanding an emergency vote to remove Sam's garden before it's too late. Her voice bounces off the paneled walls, startling the handful of residents already seated. Papers rustle. A coffee cup clinks against a folding table. The late afternoon light spills in through half-closed blinds, catching the dust in the air like fog in a sunbeam. The board must act now, she insists, stepping quickly to the front. This property remains a threat. We have to protect ourselves. Sam enters quietly behind her, not bothering to glance in her direction. He takes a seat in the second row, nodding politely to the couple beside him. Curtis arrives a minute later, slow but steady, and stands at the back with arms folded. Karen shuffles her folder, pulling out the same fire code printout she's referenced 3 times before. Despite recent distractions, she says, glaring briefly toward the rear, we cannot lose sight of our duty. The overgrowth at Mr. Carter's home is not only unsightly, it's a liability. There's a murmur across the room, but not the kind that signals agreement. Mr. Levine leans over to whisper something to a neighbor, who responds with a quiet chuckle. Karen presses on. I'm submitting a motion to remove the non-compliant plantings within 72 hours. If he won't act, the board must. She looks around expectantly. No hands rise, no nods, only shifting feet and diverted eyes. The HOA secretary clears her throat. Before we move on that, perhaps Mr. Carter would like to speak. Sam stands slowly, adjusting his collar. I'll be brief, he says. He walks to the front, setting a thin folder on the table beside Karen's stack of notes. What I have here, he says, tapping the folder, is documentation from the county records office. Under Firewise landscaping guidelines, every plant in my yard is exempt from removal due to fire safety concerns. Section 18.3b, if anyone's curious. Karen's lips press into a thin line. Sam continues, his voice steady. I've also included maintenance logs, photos, and confirmation from a licensed inspector. He nods toward the back, where Curtis gives a small wave. There's no hazard, Sam says simply. Only disagreement. A woman in the third row raises her hand. Why were we never told about these exemptions? I included them in my first response to the violation, Sam replies. They were disregarded. Karen steps forward again. That's because... Mr. Levine raises his cane slightly. That's because you ignored it, Karen. Just like you ignored the drainage from your pool. Just like you ignored our questions last night. There's silence. Then a voice from near the back. I move to dismiss all HOA actions against Mr. Carter. A second voice follows. I second. The vote is fast, unanimous. Even Karen doesn't raise her hand in protest. The room feels lighter somehow, less tense. Sam sits back down, his hands folded in his lap. He doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. Karen lingers at the front of the room, clutching her folder like a shield. Her face is tight, jaw clenched, knuckles white. She opens her mouth, then closes it again. I can't lead a board that no longer trusts me, she says at last, barely above a whisper. I resign. No one responds, not out of cruelty, but because the moment has spoken for itself. She walks out slowly this time, head high, but without her usual fire. Curtis walks over to Sam afterward and pats his shoulder. Didn't even need a shovel, he says with a grin. Sam chuckles under his breath. Facts dig deep enough. As the room begins to empty, two members of the board approach Sam by the table. One clears her throat gently. Mr. Carter, she says, would you consider helping us rewrite the bylaws? The Oak Ridge Gazette's front page reads, Carter Garden, declared model Firewise landscape. The bold headline sits just above a photo of Sam standing in front of his home, one hand on his hip, the other resting lightly on a pitchfork. His garden spreads out behind him like a desert tapestry, sage, aloe, wildflowers, all in full bloom beneath the soft blue of a spring sky. That Saturday morning, the smell of lemon and baked oats carries across Sam's yard. A folding table has been set up near the rosemary hedge, topped with pitchers of lemonade, paper cups, and a tray of oatmeal cookies. Folding chairs form a loose semicircle around the garden path, and people have already begun to gather, chatting quietly as they sip and nibble. Sam stands at the center, wearing his old straw hat and a clean button-up tucked neatly into faded jeans. He gestures toward a bed of low-growing desert verbena as Curtis holds up a laminated diagram, showing root depth and moisture retention zones. This here, Sam says, voice calm but steady, acts like a fire buffer. It blooms hard in spring, but the water needs are minimal once it's established, and it won't carry a flame past 10 inches in dry weather. A woman in her 60s leans forward. Where do you get seeds like that? Local co-op, Curtis replies. Or ask Sam. He's got more than he'll ever plant. They laugh softly. It's an easy kind of laughter, the kind that floats without tension, not the brittle sort that filled past meetings. Today, even the board members seem relaxed. The new rep, a younger man named Felix in his late 30s, takes notes on a clipboard, but stops now and then to chat with neighbors. Someone asks about HOA policy. Felix responds quickly. As of next month, our guidelines will include a Firewise exemption clause. If your landscaping supports water conservation and fire prevention, You're protected." Sam nods, not smugly, but with quiet satisfaction. He watches as people wander the path, snapping photos, crouching to inspect the ground mulch. Even the kids, 2 of them, are digging around a mesquite sapling, asking if it'll grow tall enough to climb. "Not that one," Sam says, crouching beside them. "But I've got a cottonwood near the back that might interest you." Curtis passes around a small handout titled "Practical Firewise for Suburban Gardens." Sam's name is at the bottom. By late morning, the crowd begins to thin. Sam refills the lemonade and wipes his hands on a cloth, pausing beneath the rose bush at the corner of the house. It's Ellen's bush, the only non-native plant in the yard, the one exception he's always kept. Its petals are pale pink, trembling gently in the breeze. He kneels briefly and sets a small metal plaque into the soil at its base. It reads, "In memory of resilience." Curtis watches from a few feet away, giving him space. "Ellen would have liked today," Sam says quietly as he stands. "She'd have run the whole thing," Curtis replies, "and made better cookies." They both laugh. Just before noon, a county official arrives with a thin frame wrapped in brown paper. "Mr. Carter," she says, offering the package, "on behalf of the Department of Forestry, we'd like to thank you for your commitment to education and safety." Sam opens it carefully. Inside is a framed certificate with gold trim and an embossed seal. "Recognition of Excellence, Firewise Leadership, Samuel T. Carter, Oak Ridge Estates." He holds it for a long moment, then nods his thanks. "I'm just glad we're talking more about prevention and less about punishment." The official smiles. "You've made that easier for all of us." By mid-afternoon, the chairs are folded, the table cleared, and the last of the lemonade is gone. Sam walks Curtis to his car and waves him off, then stands alone for a moment beneath the mesquite. The sun is warm on his arms, but the wind carries a coolness that reminds him summer hasn't quite settled in yet. From somewhere nearby, a hummingbird flits past the rosemary, pausing midair before darting again. Sam watches it, a small smile on his face. She'd like this. As the dust settled over Oak Ridge Estates, what once seemed like a quiet dispute became a testament to patience, principle, and quiet strength. Sam didn't raise his voice or draw a line in the sand. He simply stood firm, and in doing so, helped his neighbors remember the value of roots that run deep. Justice, like a well-tended garden, doesn't always grow fast, but when nurtured, it flourishes in ways that change a community. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to let weeds of control choke out what's worth preserving. And somewhere between the sage and rosemary, a legacy quietly bloomed again.